She walked into the mansion as a waitress and walked out as the secret daughter of a murderer. What began as a simple whisper, "Oh my God, that's me," would ignite one of the most explosive reckonings the country had ever seen. The words slipped from Brielle Carter's lips before she even realized she had spoken. Her breath caught as her eyes locked onto the ornate, gold-framed photograph hanging in the dimly lit hallway of the Montclair estate, one of the most exclusive properties in all of Westbrook, Illinois. She nearly dropped the crystal tray of champagne flutes in her hands. The little girl in the photo was no more than 4 years old, her wild curls barely contained by a pink headband, her smile shy, her eyes full of innocent wonder. She was wearing a pale pink dress that Brielle hadn't seen in 2 decades except in the flashes of fragmented memory that sometimes surfaced in her dreams. But this wasn't a dream. It was a private hallway in the mansion of Bennett Montclair, one of the wealthiest men in the Midwest. And that photo was real. Brielle had worked countless events as a waitress, catering for Chicago's elite galas, fundraisers, weddings where a single floral centerpiece cost more than her month's rent. But tonight was supposed to be just another shift, another paycheck. She hadn't expected her past to leap out from a gilded frame in a house where the marble floors alone were rumored to cost over $1,200 per square foot. Raised in group homes and shuffled between foster families since infancy, Brielle had always known her early life was a mystery. Social workers offered her the same vague explanations. Records lost in a fire. Your parents couldn't be located. You were too young to remember. And maybe that was true, or maybe it was convenient. Still frozen, she stepped closer to the photo, heart pounding. Why would Bennett Montclair, a tech tycoon turned philanthropist, have a photo of her as a child? Unless no, it couldn't be. A sudden voice jolted her back to the present. "Hey, what the hell are you doing back here?" The security guard's voice was sharp, cutting through the eerie silence of the hallway. "Staff aren't allowed in this wing." "I'm sorry, I got turned around looking for the restroom," Brielle lied, managing a weak smile as her pulse raced. The man gave her a skeptical look, but motioned her back toward the main corridor. As she turned away, her eyes lingered on the photograph for just one more second, memorizing the background, the frame, every shadow. She'd have to come back for it. Back in the glittering main hall, the laughter and music resumed. No one noticed that one of the servers had just seen a ghost from her past, framed like a relic in a stranger's home. No one noticed the tears that welled up in Brielle's eyes, because no one had any idea that the girl they'd paid to serve champagne might actually belong to the man who owned the estate. The man who had just walked past her half an hour ago, without even looking twice. The chandeliers sparkled above her, casting fractured light across the ballroom floor as Brielle stepped quietly back into the main hall. Her tray balanced perfectly despite her trembling fingers. Guests in floor-length gowns and designer tuxedos swirled around her, sipping champagne and praising the host. There he was, Bennett Montclair, towering, impeccably tailored, flanked by donors and politicians, laughing softly, hand placed gently on the shoulder of a senator's wife. "Such grace," someone whispered nearby. "He's practically a saint." Brielle's eyes locked on him. The man of the hour. The philanthropist who'd spent the last decade building homes for orphans, opening charter schools, founding initiatives for lost children. A man admired by every news outlet in the country. Her stomach turned, because she'd seen something behind his smile, a flicker of something too practiced, too polished. And suddenly, all his grand gestures felt performative, like a mask worn too long. As he took the stage, the room hushed. "Thank you," he began, his voice slow and deliberate. "When I lost my daughter 20 years ago, I thought my world had ended. But out of that pain, I found purpose." Brielle stopped breathing. Her heart thudded in her chest, louder than the polite applause that followed. Lost daughter? Her tray tipped slightly as her arms went weak. She quickly adjusted, regaining control. But her mind was spiraling. She remembered the photo again. The inscription under the frame had been too faint to read from a distance, but she was certain it hadn't been a random decoration. That child, she, wasn't just a familiar face. She was the tragedy Bennett Montclair had used to justify his sainthood. Brielle watched him closely now, examining every flick of his wrist, every pause for dramatic effect. There was something else hiding in his voice, a weight, a rehearsed grief, polished from repetition. As he spoke of impossible choices, her breath caught again. "He's talking about me," She whispered under her breath, her throat dry. Was that why she'd been abandoned? A choice? A trade-off? She needed answers. But first, she needed to stay invisible. Montclair hadn't recognized her yet, and she needed to keep it that way. One wrong step, one wrong look, and the man who held the keys to her past might shut the door again forever. No, she had to play this carefully. She scanned the room. Hundreds of guests, dozens of cameras, all applauding a man who, if her gut was right, had built his legacy on a lie. And somewhere between the crystal flutes and polite smiles, Brielle Carter made a silent vow. She would uncover the truth, whatever it took, because the man being hailed as a hero might not just be her father. He might be the monster who orchestrated the most beautiful fraud the city had ever seen. Brielle could barely feel her legs as she walked back into the staff prep room behind the ballroom. The noise of the gala was muffled through the thick wooden door, but her mind roared louder than any orchestra. She placed the empty tray on the stainless steel counter and leaned against the wall, her breath shallow. A photograph. A speech about a lost daughter. Her own fragmented memories. It was too much to be coincidence. She needed confirmation, but where could she possibly start? That's when she saw him, Raymond, the event bartender. Mid-50s, sharp eyes beneath bushy brows, and a cigarette he never lit tucked behind his ear like a signature. He'd been working these circles for decades, the quiet observer behind every fundraiser, gala, and dirty little secret Chicago's elite thought they'd hidden. "Ray," she said, walking up to him, trying to sound casual. "You ever worked an event for Bennett Montclair before?" Raymond froze. "Plenty," he said, still polishing a glass. "Why? I saw something odd," Brielle offered. Ray studied her for a second. His hand stopped moving. "Look," he said, lowering his voice. "Montclair's got a reputation. Real clean on paper. But everyone knows his money's too deep, too quiet. People like that don't get that rich without stepping on a few bodies." "Bodies?" Brielle echoed. Ray hesitated, then nodded toward the back door. "You got 5 minutes?" Smoke break. Outside, the cool air cut through her skin. Raymond lit a cigarette and stared into the distance before speaking again. Back in '04, Montclair's wife Claire died in a car accident. He made air quotes with 2 fingers. Same year his daughter vanished. Never found a body. Just gone. Brielle's throat tightened. He said she died. In the speech tonight. Raymond exhaled smoke. That's what he's always said. But people talk. And the talk says she didn't die. She disappeared. And not by accident. Brielle looked down, her heart hammering. "Do you remember the daughter's name?" Raymond squinted. "Something with a B, I think." "Brie? Brinley? Bria?" "Something close." The world tilted under her feet. That wasn't just close. That was her. Raymond continued, unaware of her shock. "Anyway, after Claire died, Bennett inherited the insurance. And then boom, 6 months later, the Montclair Children's Foundation is born. Real convenient." Brielle's fingers curled into fists. That foundation, now hailed as one of the most respected child welfare charities in the country, was built on the ashes of a wife and child who supposedly died the same week. But what if only one had? She looked back at the mansion, glowing like a cathedral of virtue behind her. And she knew what she had to do next. If there were documents, reports, insurance claims, anything that could confirm what she suspected, she had to find them. Quietly, systematically. Because she wasn't just looking for answers anymore. She was digging up a corpse the world had long buried, and one very powerful man had worked overtime to keep hidden. That night, Brielle couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, the photo from the hallway floated before her, glowing like an accusation. Her mind spun in loops, memories that didn't quite fit, whispers from her foster years about lost paperwork, social workers who changed stories mid-sentence. But now she had a lead. By morning, she was seated in a quiet corner of Southside Brew and Books, the local cafe where she worked part-time. Her apron was on, but her focus wasn't on cappuccinos. It was on her laptop, screen glowing softly beneath the hum of overhead lights. She had created a new email, encrypted and untraceable, a new social media identity, and a very simple mission: dig. First, she searched for Bennett Montclair's late wife Claire Donovan Montclair. Within minutes, a public obituary surfaced. Claire had died in a single-vehicle accident on Lake Shore Drive in September 2004. The report said her daughter, Brinley, age 4, had been presumed dead in the crash. Presumed. No autopsy. No burial record. Just a vague statement about no remains recovered. And 2 weeks later, a $5 million life insurance claim filed by Bennett Montclair. One policy for Claire. A second one for Brinley. Brielle's fingers hovered over the keyboard. That name Brinley burned. Brinley was me. I'm the dead girl. She saved the documents to a hidden folder on her drive and kept going. Searching deeper. Claire Montclair had been more than just a socialite. Turns out, she was an investigative journalist known for her exposés on the failures of child welfare systems and the corruption inside private adoption agencies. In the final months before her death, she'd published a series of articles hinting at an underground adoption network trafficking children through unlicensed institutions in Illinois and Missouri. The last article appeared on September 2, 2004. She died on September 10th. There were no follow-ups. No investigations. Just silence. Brielle felt ice run through her. Claire had been digging into something. Then she died. Brinley, she had vanished. Bennett inherited millions. And suddenly, he was reborn as a national symbol of benevolence. It wasn't grief that turned him into a philanthropist. It was strategy. He turned tragedy into branding, building an empire of mercy on the graves of the very people he buried in secrecy. But something didn't make sense. If Bennett had declared her dead, how had she ended up in foster care? That's when Brielle remembered her regular morning customer, a quiet, silver-haired woman who always sat near the window, scribbling in a battered leather notebook and ordering triple-shot cappuccinos. Her name was Ruth Costello, a retired private investigator. And she'd once told Brielle, sometimes the people who vanished didn't run. They were erased. Today, Brielle was going to ask Ruth for the kind of favor that could get someone killed. But she had no choice. Because if what she suspected was true, her mother hadn't just died in a car crash. She'd been silenced. And the man responsible had no idea his biggest secret had just walked back into his life, alive. Ruth Costello didn't look surprised when Brielle approached her at the cafe later that afternoon, her hands clenched tightly around 2 cappuccinos. Let me guess, Ruth said without looking up. You're not here to talk about latte art. Brielle hesitated. I need information. On someone powerful. Ruth slowly closed her notebook and took the coffee. Her eyes, pale gray and unervingly perceptive, fixed on Brielle like a scalpel. Powerful is expensive, she said flatly. I don't have money, Brielle admitted. But I can work for you. I'll clean, organize your files, whatever it takes. Ruth studied her face for a long moment, then sighed. You're not just chasing answers, are you? She said softly. You're hunting a ghost. Brielle said nothing. I'll help, Ruth nodded. But you tell me everything. Right now. They moved to a corner booth, and Brielle unloaded every detail. She had her foster care history, the photo in the Montclair mansion, Raymond's warning, the obituary, the insurance claims. Ruth listened in total silence, jotting notes in tight handwriting on the edge of her napkin. When Brielle finished, Ruth tapped her pen thoughtfully. You were declared dead in that crash, she said. But you survived. That means someone had to falsify documents to reroute you into the foster system under a new identity. That's federal fraud. Brielle swallowed hard. You think he did it? I know men like Montclair, Ruth said coldly. They don't grieve. They cover tracks. Over the next few days, Ruth began digging. She called in favors from old colleagues, dusted off legal contacts, and cross-referenced public death certificates with state-level foster intake records. Every day she returned with one more chilling puzzle piece. Until, finally, she brought a folder and laid it on Brielle's kitchen table. Read, she said. Inside were forged documents, a fake death certificate for Brinley Montclair, a medical report falsifying the presence of a child's body in the crash, and a state record showing the sudden intake of an unnamed toddler, age 4, into the care of Illinois Foster Services the same week. Brielle's hand trembled as she read the next page. A life insurance payout record to Bennett Montclair, $5 million in total. $1 million for his wife. $4 million for the loss of a child. He profited off my fake death, Brielle whispered. Ruth's mouth tightened, and built a foundation on it. But it got worse. Ruth flipped to the last page, an old case file. Claire Montclair had hired a private investigator just 2 weeks before the crash, she explained. He disappeared 3 days before she did. Then she handed Brielle a blurry photo. It showed Claire, alive, on a hospital stretcher, eyes open, bloodied but conscious. The timestamp was 2 hours after the supposed accident time listed on her death certificate. She didn't die at the scene, Ruth said. She died in the hospital. In pain, Brielle added. And alone, Ruth nodded grimly. And before she died, she told a nurse, "Protect the girl. He's a monster." Brielle stood there frozen, a storm swirling in her chest. Her mother had tried to save her, even as she lay dying. And now, it was Brielle's turn to finish what Claire had started. Because the man who had profited from lies, buried the truth, and erased a child from history, was about to face the daughter he thought he'd buried alive. The Westbrook Civic Center gleamed like a palace of light, draped in velvet banners embossed with gold lettering. Montclair Foundation Annual Gala, a night for the forgotten. But tonight, it wasn't the children that the crowd would remember. It was the secret that refused to stay buried. Brielle stood behind the velvet curtain, dressed not in a server's uniform this time, but in a sleek midnight blue gown. Her hair was swept back, her eyes fierce. In her hand, a flash drive, and in her mind, 20 years of silence about to end. On stage, Bennett Montclair stood before a sea of applause, basking in adoration as he delivered another speech about second chances and the power of fatherhood. He spoke of pain, of loss, of redemption. He didn't know the storm was already in the room. Brielle stepped into the light as the last round of clapping faded. Calm, controlled, unannounced. "Mr. Montclair," she said, her voice slicing through the silence. "May I ask you a question?" The room stiffened. Montclair blinked, disoriented. I believe you're." "I was touched," Brielle said, cutting him off, "by your speech about losing a daughter. So I'd like to ask, how exactly did she die?" A hush fell across the gala like a fallen chandelier. Montclair cleared his throat. "I don't discuss personal tragedies in public." "That's unfortunate," she replied, stepping closer. "Because I do." From her purse, she pulled out a folder. The press cameras flashed. She turned to the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Brielle Claire Montclair, or as this man preferred to call me. The problem he solved." The crowd gasped. Montclair froze. She opened the folder. "Here's the forged death certificate," she said, her voice unwavering. "Here's the $4 million life insurance payout he claimed for my supposed death. And here," she held up the autopsy report, "is proof my mother, Claire Montclair, didn't die in a car crash. She was poisoned hours later at the hospital, conscious and terrified." "Lies," Montclair roared, face red with panic. "This is slander. She's not my daughter." "Really?" Brielle said, pulling out the final piece, the photo from his mansion. Projected behind her on the screen, enlarged for everyone to see. A little girl in pink, with curls and a soft smile. On the back, written in faded ink, "To the best daddy in the world. Love, Brinley." The room exploded into chaos. "I was 4 when you tried to erase me," Brielle said, turning to him. "But I lived. And now I'm here. And so is every truth you buried." Security stepped forward. So did 2 men in black suits with badges FBI. "Mr. Montclair," one agent said, "you are under arrest for insurance fraud, conspiracy, and suspected murder." Montclair didn't resist. He couldn't. His legs buckled as the handcuffs clicked shut. The guests backed away in horror. Phones recorded. Headlines were already being written. But Brielle just stood still, breathing, as the man who had tried to destroy her life was let out like a criminal. 6 months later, the name on the office door now read, Claire Montclair Foundation, Executive Director, Brielle Carter. The millions recovered from Montclair's frozen accounts had built 4 new orphanages, funded 138 scholarships, and reunited dozens of displaced families. Ruth Costello now served as the foundation's chief investigator. Raymond coordinated events. And Brielle, once a waitress, had become a national icon of truth and justice. Her face graced magazine covers, and her story aired on every network in America. In one CNN interview, when asked what she would say to her biological father, Brielle simply said, "Nothing. Some ghosts don't deserve closure. They deserve to fade." But even as she closed that chapter, Brielle had started a new one. With the help of Ruth and her Aunt Claire's sister, whom she had found during the investigation, they were preparing to publish Claire's journals, exposing the dark network of illegal adoptions Claire had died trying to uncover. "This isn't just my mother's legacy," Brielle said at the press launch. "It's the future of every child who's ever been lost, abandoned, or lied to." We don't need false heroes. We need truth. She visited her mother's grave that night. A new headstone stood where a forgotten plaque once lay. Claire Montclair, mother, journalist, warrior. Her voice lives on. Brielle placed a single white rose and whispered, "We did it, Mom. He buried us. But we bloomed." And somewhere across the state, in a cold prison cell, Bennett Montclair watched her speech on a flickering television screen, realizing that the daughter he had declared dead now lived louder than he ever could. Justice hadn't just come. It had come wearing the face he tried to erase. Thank you for watching this story. If it moved you, shocked you, or made you think twice about how far the truth can be buried, don't just scroll away. Hit the like button to show your support for stories that bring hidden voices into the light. Drop a comment below. What would you do if you uncovered a secret like Brielle's? And most importantly, subscribe to the channel for more real, raw, and powerful narratives that challenge injustice and celebrate resilience. Your engagement helps these stories reach the people who need them most. Because sometimes, the most powerful justice starts with awareness.